What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Digital Banter. Joining us today is Drew Neisser, founder of CMO Huddles, which is a community of CMOs, 450 plus, I think you said, Drew, kind of solving real world problems right now, right?
You bet. Yes. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to get into a lot today about CMOs and I think broadly speaking, marketing leadership and what they have to deal with and kind of what you talked about in kind of our brainstorm meeting, managing against impossible demands. But before we get into all that, James has a question that he always likes to ask guests before we get into the meat of the conversation.
All right. So I have this philosophy that I feel like nobody wakes up and says that they want to get into B2B marketing. And I know that that's kind of been your background for a very long time. So I want to hear a little bit about your story. So start with, I think way back, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid? And story from there of how you fell into B2B.
Yes. So as a kid, I had a very specific goal. I wanted to be a professional ping pong player and a spy. And so I could go to China as a professional ping pong player and really be a spy. So I thought that would be a very cool thing. So marketing was a backup. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're getting a lot of interesting stories here. We had a preacher. We have now a ping pong spy.
Yeah,
Damn.
that was it was complicated. And then when I was done with that, I had a whole career planned as a stand-up. But I didn't want to do stand-up until I was late in my life because I wouldn't have cared if anybody laughed, and chances are they wouldn't have. So, but I always thought that would be fun too.
Do you do stand-up?
I do not. No, and it's a good thing.
I could see it.
No,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I'm more of an improv guy than I am a stand-up guy.
All right. Well, that's what we're doing here. So
that's what we're doing.
There we go. All right, so let's hop in this a little bit. So, Drew, out of your 450 CMOs, along with your entire career of working with marketing leaders, especially in the B2B space, you've kind of cultivated so many insights and experiences. But if you were to sum up the mood that exists among marketing leaders today, like, what would it be?
I realized, by the way, I didn't answer James' question about how I got into B2B and why, and it is an important part of that. I want to answer that first, and then I'll give you that word. Is that all right? It's fair, James. I feel like I did you a disservice in the answer. So, at a point, and Andy remembers these days, he used to run an agency called Renegade, and way back when we did both B2B and B2C, and at some point it just occurred to me that the bar was so much lower on B2B than B2C. It was just easier to be outstanding. I didn't want to compete with massive creative agencies. And so we were Little Renegade doing Renegade things. And it really felt Renegade to those B2B. So that's why it was just easier to be a Renegade in B2B. Now, to your question, sum up the mood. I first want to preface this by saying CMOs in general, marketing leaders in general, are the most optimistic people you will ever meet. Having said that, if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be painful.
Painful.
Painful. That is the mood right now. It is painful.
What is the biggest pain that they're dealing with right now?
It is the triple threat of sort of the general market uncertainty, the transformation of technology, and this the rise of PE and this vortex of expectations changing from you used to get a little time. Now it's, fix everything yesterday.
Let's talk about the PE thing, because I found this super interesting when we were talking earlier. My hypothesis was always that venture capital was the biggest pain in the butt as a CMO. And it sounds like what you found is that's actually not the case. So can you kind of dive into that a bit?
Yeah. I mean, so if you're VC funding your, seed rounds, A, B, C, what you're really trying to do is find out is if there's a market for this product, or is there a fit out there? So you emphasize growth and building a bigger net than you do EBITDA, right? I mean, if you think about an Amazon, they weren't profitable for years and years and years. And there were a lot of other companies who sort of took that approach and still do with VC capital. Growth is the first goal. Now, if you get into a later series, the VCs are saying, sure, we should have growth and income. But PE firms are coming in, their goal is EBITDA, because remember, they are looking for return. Now, they want growth too, but First is, and so much of their playbook involves cutting costs in order to gussy up those balance sheets so it looks like this is a pretty little pig, isn't it?
What's it like on the marketing side as a leader? I think there's like pros and cons to it, right? So like on the venture capital side, it's like, great, you have a lot of money, you can do a lot of testing, you're pushing towards growth, until it comes back to bite you is how I would look at it. Cause we've seen many venture capital funded companies scale. And then the question gets asked of like, how do we hit profitability? And then everything gets wiped out. At least on the PE side, from what I've seen and stuff that we've dealt with as an agency specifically, it's like we know what we're working with. And as an agency, we almost like prefer to work with those PE companies because they're working with money that they actually have. So that means that any scope or contract with them, and if it's working, like they're going to keep doing it versus VC. Like I just feel like you get the plug pulled at any point.
I think there's a couple of differences. One is that VC companies often are not in that stage of profitable growth, and they're still trying to figure out how to get there. So fair enough. They're probably, a lot of them are too small to have an agency like yours. And PE firms recognize the value of, to some extent. And again, I think it's really important to not universally say there's this mythical PE firm and they all behave the same way. Because I do know some CMOs who are working for PE firms who are happy. Most are miserable, but there are a few that are happy. So I want to make sure, and they can deliver value. But I think the thing that I would dive into is there could be great partners at the PE firm. And let's say the CMO understands the thesis. Why did this PE firm buy this company? They bought it because they thought this was a problem. And if we fix that problem, then we could sell it for more money than we paid for it. Right. So let's assume the CMO is smart enough to know what that is. There is this issue of the little PE drones that go in and look at every single report and then say, we want to look at 200 pages of reports, and they take 70% of the CMO's time, is justifying things like keyword buys and cost per click. That's when it gets ridiculous, because we're looking to optimize at the 0.001% of something, where CMOs should be optimizing at the big scale, not in fractions of a percent, but they should be thinking about how do we transform the business to a point where we're looking at 15% growth and margins or better. And we're doing some big leaps, not this squeeze that radish, because of the time and return on investment. So that's where the real problem is in the level of detail that they often face and the time suck that it creates.
So using that then as a jumping off point, like in some of your conversations with huddles, like how are the best CMOs kind of managing those opposite direction pulling conversations and responsibilities, I guess?
Well, so there's a few answers. One is they get into a situation, I know, and I can share, it was a CMO who was at a $1 billion company that had been merged with another very large company. And basically the PE firm said, okay, we're changing the name. We're announcing the launchment. You have 1 month to integrate everything. And then you need to grow everything by 50%. And we're cutting your budget by 50%. They spent about a month in it and they said, I can't do this. I can't. It's going to kill me. So many that I know that are really, really good quit because they can find better jobs where there is some realistic connection between input and output, where they can actually achieve the goals that have been set before them. So that's part one. I don't like that as a solution. I mean, I'd much rather see a CMO try to figure it out and work with rational minds. There is, in an ideal world, the CEO has the strength to say, no, this person's really important. They're helping strategically driving the business. They're not just the marketer, they're a business partner. They're doing all these, and they're providing a little air cover. But if it's a CEO who doesn't understand marketing, which is 80% of them, and the CEO says, well, if you won't hit those numbers, I'll just find someone who will. And so what you find in those situations is they swap out the CMO, they swap out the CRO, and everybody's set back 18 months because the knowledge that just walked out the door is incredible. So it doesn't work, but there's a notion that these are interchangeable parts.
No, I mean, we see it all the time. I think, combined between all of us, what we would say an average CMO lifespan is 2 years or less. Like it just rotates over for all of the different reasons that you just said, Drew.
Yeah. And again, I think it's a little bit longer than that. And I also want to make sure that folks realize that I know a number of CMOs who do the 3 years and then they voluntarily move on because they have a year 1, a year 2, and a year 3 plan, but they don't really have a year 4 plan. And so they're fine with that. And I think that does. And then there are some who are churning it a year, and just that's a lose-lose for everybody.
Right. Exactly. And it's a lose because of all the partners that exist out there who are going in one direction, hopefully, and now all of a sudden have to change directions on a consistent basis.
I'm going to let you in a little secret. PE firms don't care about you agency people.
Yeah, I know.
We're very concerned.
You are collateral damage, my friends.
They barely care about the CMO, as we're finding
They
out
don't
here.
care about the CMO. Really?
So, I mean,
and yet, if you go to their site, you're going to see a people first cultural about us page, right?
We are a people first PE firm. Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
First.
Okay. So when we think about all of that, let's throw a wrench into this entire conversation and bring AI. Let's bring AI immediately into it.
Okay.
And the shiny object that influences literally everything a CMO probably has to deal with, from product adoption and feature requests and releases through to your point before, transforming the internal operations of the business. Like, what are the things that are standing out to you in the CMO landscape from an AI perspective right now?
Okay, so let's work on the bad news first and get that out of the way. So I literally, and I'm working on this, it'll probably be in my post tomorrow, my Saturday LinkedIn rant. CEO said to their CMO, you should be able to cut your staff by 80% because of AI. Just like that. Off you go. See you later. Cut that staff by 80%. So that is in line with this expectation that, oh my gosh, everything can be automated. We don't need people, and let's just get rid of them. And it's just so funny because never in the history of software, and this may be different, has actually a set of software that promised to reduce staff actually done so. It just moved them to another room. Right. It's so I do think this will be different. But I do think that also the human aspect of marketing is not to be underestimated and should become more important. So I do not think that 100% agentic world for marketing will actually produce better outcomes. Having said that, there's a lot of opportunity that AI is creating for CMOs. And so we have a vision we talk about a lot is, you want to see, as a CMO, you want to be a chief, you want to be a seat at the table. There is a problem and perception of marketing alone as that. Like, oh, you're the marketing person, you're the arts and crafts group. That part of marketing is what they think of. And they think of that's fun and they have opinions on it. What CMO wants to do is have a business seat at the table. They're a business person first. The easiest way to do that is not to be just the marketer. So we call this CMO plus. So AI, because so many other departments are slow with this, I know a number of CMOs who are leading the AI initiatives at their company. And that's amazing. And what it means is they get to set the agenda for the company, but they do that by being really smart about how they implement AI in their departments. And so can I keep going?
Yeah,
keep going.
Oh my God. Cause I think it's amazing. And it's a transformation in the last year between how people were doing it last year and how they're starting to think about it this year. Last year, it was go play. This year, it's about strategy. Again, it's always been about strategy. We just didn't think of it that way, right? So what CMOs are doing to try to take the lead on this is they're benchmarking every single process that they have in their workflows, every single process, whether it's a research report, a blog content, a go-to-market campaign, every single one of those things they're looking at. And if they look at all of them and they say, oh my God, this is taking 700 man hours a month. How many man hours could we reduce if we introduce AI into some aspect or built a workflow tool? So and once you start talking about that in language that suddenly a CFO will pay attention, a CEO pay attention, because we said, here is the desired output. We're doing a strategic campaign. It's going to touch these kind of people. It's going to take this long to do it. And we do it over and over and over again. AI is really good at fixing repetitive tasks. So they're benchmarking. Nobody was benchmarking last year. They're benchmarking this year. They're looking at the things where, and then simultaneously you're saying, what are our top 10 strategic initiatives that we want to do this year? And what could AI do to help us get to those? So you have sort of our big processes that are time consuming, and we have our big strategies that we want to implement. And you can look at the two of those and you sort of see, wow, okay, there's some intersection there. And then AI becomes a strategic weapon, not a tactical thing that allows you to create content faster.
Do you think the focus is more on how can we get more done, or is it more on cutting costs from, I'll say, like the overall leadership perspective, CEO to CMO? Like what are they focusing on in that conversation?
Well, in that one conversation I alluded to earlier, it's just about efficiency. It's like do more with less, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not accepting a trade-off. They want more content and they want you to do it 80% faster with 80% fewer people, right? That's this magical thinking that is happening. So it's both. It's not an or. It's why the job's getting so hard. I want more of everything and I want it faster and I want it cheaper with less people.
Yeah, but I feel like it's almost like what you just described is also trying to reframe the ask of the CEO, where it's, yes, there's a reduction in headcount, but more importantly, there's not an increase in headcount if you're creating efficiencies. So
Right.
long term, yeah, you're saving costs and hopefully hitting the growth trajectory at the same time. Which,
Right.
to your point too, is increasing EBITDA.
So, I mean, I think that the staffing of a CMO's group is going to change.
Sure.
And you might need fewer sort of lower level people, but I think you're going to need more. If we say that sort of the genius of the CMO is connecting dots between customer and product and tech and company and culture, and they're sort of the keeper of the customer and the market, it's the machine can't do that.
Right.
Because there's judgment involved, there's differentiation involved, and it's not just the CMO, it's at every stage of it. Because at some point in time, we're going to look and they say, collectively, are we building a cumulative thing that is larger than the sum of it, is bigger than the sum of its parts, aka reputation, right? And bots aren't going to think about reputation. They're going to think about this this test worked better than this test, so do it. And we know that sometimes you don't just choose the most efficient email because it's not in line with the brand.
Absolutely.
So, and those judgment calls you're going to need layers of judgment on every aspect of that AI touches.
So how do you think that's going to affect team makeup? Because let's kind of trickle this all the way down, because it's something that we think about all the time as an agency now. And to be honest, I'm right with you as far as I wonder what junior level roles in any organization are going to look like in the future, and thinking deep into the future, if that doesn't exist, how are you going to get into the strategic, how do you develop into a CMO if you have no place to start? Right.
I know. It's a great question. And I think we could overestimate the impact of all of this way too quickly. And it's it's sort of like, oh, we're going to get rid of all our BDRs because we won't need it because we'll have a bot. And then yet there'll be a bunch of leads in the pipeline and they need to be qualified and nobody wants to talk to a bot on an outbound. So who's going to move those along? Probably a human, right? Who's going to connect the random dots and yes, again, you can train these machines. They can do a lot of these things. And I do think that anybody coming out of school who doesn't know how to use these tools is going to be at a disadvantage. But so if you said, so from an agency standpoint, I think you're going to need creative people. And you're always going to need creative people, and that creative thinkers who can connect dots that probably shouldn't have been connected. Right? That's the part the machines are not very good at. There's also ultimately there is going to be this human factor, and with every tech trend, there's a human counter trend. And that's going to be another important part of this. So I don't have the answer to how these junior people are going to get started. I just know that junior people embracing these tools can do incredible things that they couldn't do before. Like suddenly everybody could code. If I were, coming out of college, I'd be vibe coding all sorts of things, right?
I love it. Vibe coding. That was Andy back in the day. What did we call it? Cowboy coding?
I was a cowboy coder.
Whenever you would try to like do anything.
Yeah.
Our developer hated me because I would just screw with stuff.
But now it's like, it's not only cool, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to create new jobs. They're going to be different jobs, and it's going to be up to you to think about, if we put these things together, maybe we could do this. And there's so many different areas where AI isn't being applied. I mean, marketing still spends a lot of time thinking about sales enablement. Marketing still thinks a lot of time when you bring marketing into the big pitch, we're finally got the big meeting for the $1 million contract. You can't send bots in there. The bot's going to help you put that presentation together, but I don't know. Ultimately, there's going to be some people in the room and they got to represent the organization and they got to be able to articulate a story, and they got to look like a big, happy family that isn't a bunch of robots.
Well, to your point about alternative trends too, though, like events are making a comeback, right? That is the most huge, because with all of COVID stuff, like people have a real desire to interact with other people. And I think that that's going to continue to take off.
Yeah. I mean, I was at an event yesterday. I've been to a lot of events in the last month, and you're absolutely right. They've all been full. And the one event that I was at was for marketers who were just educating. That was what they were doing. Well, in theory, you could have done that online, but it was so much more fun and meaningful. And again, they allowed people to come together and chat, and they forced interactions. It was great, and it was half day. And so yes, and again, a machine could make that more effective, perhaps by looking at the content. But there was a presenter there who was fantastic. Just fantastic. And personally, that gets me excited. I go, oh my God, he was so good. I gotta raise my bar. I gotta get better, because this guy was so inspiring. He was so good. So there's lots of things that come out of this stuff. So I agree with you. There will be, the more bots we interact with, the more humans we're going to want to hang out with.
Yeah.
Going back to what you're saying about the CMO and having the opportunity to shape so much of the organization outside of marketing, and then the AI aspect of that. Like, what about the downstream kind of influence and impact of that on team building and culture, and having to really shape that narrative so that it's not about like jobs being lost or taken over, but I guess repurposing responsibilities almost?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. And so it's funny. If you I definitely am in favor of CMOs, obviously working with the CEO and the board to develop the vision and the mission and the purpose of the company, and being able to communicate those to the rest of the organization and bring excitement and energy so people feel like they're doing something that's important and worthwhile, and that they're proud of the company that they work for. All of those are good things. And funny enough, one of the things in our quick wins, first 90 days quick wins, is I always say the first week, do an employee survey, right? Because you want to make them feel like they're part of this process. And you learn a lot, and you have an action to show for your effort. I am not keen necessarily on the CMO saying, hey, I'm the chief culture officer, or I'm doing internal comms or so, because we're trying to get credibility for our business acumen and getting closer to revenue. And like, employee retention, as important as it is, and I talk about it in my book, and I believe that employees first companies do better than companies that aren't. I don't think you'll keep your job. You're not more likely to keep your job because you've taken this over. The perception of the board will not change. The perception of the board will change when you are talking about, this is our win rate today, and this is our pricing power today. When we talk about win rate, we're winning 1 in 5. Okay. And we're only at bat at 20% of the deals out there. You can then go back to, well, why are we not winning more? And almost always it comes down to reputation.
Yeah, I was thinking more so about through the lens of like internal marketing versus external marketing.
Yes. So there's two questions. That internal marketing is incredibly important and is incredibly valuable. And if you can build your employees up to be advocates and they can go out and express their joy at working in the company, it's incredibly powerful. I believe it is actually a marketing strategy. What we were talking about is, how do you secure your role and enable yourself to be able to make the major transformations that you need to make at an organization? You don't necessarily get that by talking about those things.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Because I know, and you know, that happier employees equal happier customers equal more revenue. Start with revenue and work your way back.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to prove out that, probably more than
right.
2 years.
And look, you can show them. Look, if you have a stronger reputation, this is a business value, and you can weigh this in, and it shows up. If you have a stronger reputation, that your costs of recruiting are lower than your competitors, that's a competitive advantage. Your retention, your turnover rate is lower than your competitor. That is a competitive advantage, because typically keeping employees longer is good for, the company, particularly like if you have salespeople or technology experts or something like that. If they feel really good about the company, they'll want to stay. In the current environment of more with less today, that is not what I would want to hang my hat on if I was a CMO. I'm not saying it isn't really important and right. And if we were just building a company and we didn't have to worry about the investors, then I would absolutely say employees, then customers, then prospects as priorities.
So I got a question to dig deeper into that. Does it matter where the revenue comes from? So example, focusing on net new logo acquisition, call it, versus upsell, cross-sell, being more involved in like product marketing, that type of stuff.
First of all, really good question. And the answer is, it depends on the company. And I think it depends on the current environment. Because of the uncertainty that a lot of businesses are seeing, it's impossible to forecast. They're revising their forecasts every single week. Net new customers is really hard. So, but upsell and cross-sell, much, much easier, because you already are a approved vendor in the system and so forth. So I think everybody will tell you that 2024 was a really hard year to get net new. That deals took longer. to close or didn't close, and more deals didn't close, and nobody bought anything. It wasn't like they lost nothing. So, and right now I think Q1 is exactly like that as well. So anyway, the answer is, if you are lucky enough to have an installed base and a product line that you can upsell and cross sell and keep, right? Retention matters. Then in those cases, is the CMO play an active role in retention, upsell, and cross sell, right? And a lot of times they don't, which is unfortunate.
Where does that fall usually? Just like purely CS?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And CS sometimes they're really, we know the customer, the A's are saying, I got this, don't leave them. I know who they are and what they're doing. And, it's silly because 25% of those folks, those users and buyers are churning every year. Not that the customer is, the brand name is leaving, but then individual is leaving.
I mean, that's a thing that frankly, I think AI could ruin very quickly.
In terms of what?
Like customer service. Like I think that is being replaced a lot with, I'll give it examples of just stuff that we deal with, like working with like Google reps and Facebook reps. If you don't spend a certain amount now, that you have to talk to a robot for 8 conversations before you can get any help. And it's like, I'm sure for some advertisers, especially on like Facebook side, like they've said enough is enough, we're going somewhere else. And I think that the more that companies try to roll out that kind of stuff, it's going to get worse, because that's something that people do want, human connection. They want somebody who can help them.
And I think it's situational, and I think it's somewhat demographic, but not completely. So interesting thing, and it's still true today. One of the members of our community works with a very large global call center company, and you talk about antiquated. Wait, someone at the other end. Every single touch, whether they called to complain or come for an explanation, represents an uptick in reputation and likely to repurchase. Whether they called for a complaint or not, the human touch in that circumstance matters, and I don't think that's going to change. At the same time, I will tell you that one of the low-hanging fruits out there for CMOs in their first 90 days is to quickly improve the website experience. We've got something on renegademarketing.com, our media brand. We installed a little question banner powered by webless.ai. And that banner, you could ask anything on that website. You could say, hey, why doesn't an elephant have 5 legs? And it'll find a way to connect that question to some content on our website. And so it helps content get discovered. So I do think that there's a role. And then we're testing another technology, SalesSpeak, that is a better bot. So all I can tell you, because it's built on every bit of information on our website, and it's progressive, and it populates it with questions, and it anticipates sort of where you might go. And I think that there are times where self-service is just fine, right? I'm just learning about the company. I want to know a little bit more. Give me the answers I'm looking for. And you can't find them through the architecture of the website.
Yeah.
And this is another level well beyond what Drift and those kinds of sort of conversational bots. It's sort of the next generation of that. And I think that's going to work really well in a lot of circumstances as you're doing your sort of explorations out there.
What else falls on your quick wins 90 days list?
So, again, what are we trying to do in that first 90 days? What we're trying to do is earn some credibility to buy you time to fix the big problems. And usually, if sales are slow, it's not a marketing problem. It's a go-to-market problem, right? There's a product, there's a service, there's some issues. Those issues are not going to be solved in the first 90 days, but you need to identify those in the first 90 days. So while you're doing that, you should be A/B testing landing pages. You should be A/B testing your landing, you should be installing things like the weblist.ai that could be up and running in a day, right? You can do some things like that. You can make sure that you can figure out, is your SEO strategy right, or GEO strategy working at all? Do you even have a GEO strategy, right? And so you're finding the things. We have a long list. It's like 3 pages of things that you can do that in the first 90 days that will answer what the heck are you been doing. Among those is meet every day with the head of sales. There is no longer a moment. Stop talking about marketing sourced. Nobody cares. Just put that aside. We report on the same numbers. We've got pipeline, we've got close rate. Those are really great, and figure out where the problems are in that. Work with the sales folks. Think about war rooms for the big clients where you and your team and the sales team are talking every day against the same sort of language and definitions. That seems to be an interesting one. Marketer has one definition for, what's a sales qualified opportunity? Those kinds of things. Those things we got to fix, right? So there's a lot of definitional things. There's a lot of little mini tweaks that you can do. Again, all of which is time to fix the bigger problem. And I see, so the corollary of this is that a lot of CMOs go in and in the first 6 months, they use all their political capital to change the brand. And as much as I know that a lot of brands should be changed, I think that is the absolute worst thing that they can do.
That was going to be my question. I was going to say, so the rebrand isn't on your list?
Oh my God. And I almost can always predict that CMO is going to be gone in a year.
I think of 3 examples in my head of that exact situation without naming names or companies.
And it's like, you can't, if I take a coat of paint and paint up an old barn, it's still an old barn. It's just, there's nothing. So, and look, I'm a big believer in getting brand right. Although funny enough, we stopped using that term in CMO Huddles. We like to use the term reputation because executives understand that. They go there with a bunch of their friends and, they're at the country club. And if they have a reputation as a sandbagger, they don't like that. They understand reputation. There's one other thing that I think a CMO could do in the first 90 days that isn't on my list yet, but we'll add it to it, which is work with the CFO to understand your pricing power. And this is I'm the 2 jewels that I thought about in that have risen through other really smart people that I've been talking to besides you two, is if you look at win rates and you look at pricing power, you're talking the language of the business, and typically you can find where the issue are. So let's talk pricing power. Pricing power, you got Reynolds wrap and you got generic foil. Which one are you going to buy? 9 out of 10 times.
Reynolds wrap?
Yeah. Why?
Because you've heard of them. Reputation.
I don't know about you guys, but I go for the cheap stuff. So
there you go. But you know what? In that particular case, the cheap foil often isn't as good. There's a reason it's cheaper. It breaks, it tears.
It's true. That is very true with foil.
Cheaper foil is one of those kind of things where it's not as generic as you think. And here I am talking about the reputation of it. So reputation equals pricing power. Marketing equals reputation equals pricing power. So you go to and look at the company and say, okay, 4th quarter, we were trying to hit our numbers. How much discounting did we have to do? That's one. Number 2, when was the last time we took a price increase and how did it stick against our current customers? Those 2 questions, and work with your CFO and say, marketing equals pricing power. What would pricing power mean to, if we could raise our price and 95% of our customers say, what would that mean to our EBITDA? Yeah. Now we've earned the right to say, okay, well, how do we measure reputation? What's that going to look like? How do you build reputation? How do demand and brand activities work together to build reputation? Why do we need to have customer success and sales and marketing all at the table and product to talk about this? And work out, where are you not, what are the components that deliver pricing power? I mean, it's funny, I heard today that Salesforce's total revenue exceeds that of all other marketing technology sold.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
They're talking about pricing
HubSpot.
power.
I don't know.
I mean, and people don't even like it.
Yeah.
But they're just so well entrenched, and it's they have it. So there's some reputational strength in there somewhere.
Well, there's two sides to that too, though, right? There's the how can we increase it, and then it's already too high. I can't tell you how many clients we've taken on in the years that are a challenger brand that is more expensive and offers less than their competition, and they wonder what the problem is.
Right. Well, yeah, the market usually is pretty smart about that.
Yeah.
It's funny. It is a tricky thing. I mean, I think the Reynolds rep is a good example because the cheaper brands are in fact not as strong. They're not as good. So in that case, price equals not just perceived value, but real value. I think there are cases in a lot of brands, and that's more true with consumer than business, but there are a lot of brands that have perceived value that's higher than their actual value.
Well, even like you were talking about Drift before and all of these other tools that are very similar or better now and are cheaper in a lot of those situations. Like that's a huge shakeup in that space alone.
Yeah. And again, this where it comes down to it is how hard is it to extract? There's a problem. Once you're down the HubSpot or sales, it's just the pain of change is so high. Right. So, they built a nice little moat around their business. And I think that challenge agencies have is they have no moats.
I got one more question that I think is very relevant to this. What are your opinion on the whole creating a category thing that people are doing to try to increase their perceived value to?
It's another really rich thing. And so first of all, I have a definition of what it means to have created a category. You are a category when there are people whose jobs actually sort of depend on your category. So if we take Tableau, when they were trying to create the data visualization category, there were people who were data visualizers. Take Marketo, who sort of took, marketing on it. There were, Marketoans. They were actually that. So one, there are people whose jobs and livelihoods are dependent on that. Two, the analysts actually recognize you as a category, which means three, you have competitors. Okay, so that's, if we define that's what a category means, and you have a category, is the pursuit of category creation worth the energy it takes to and so the answer is, I think every brand has to be differentiated. You have to find your point of differentiation. If you are going to define yourself as a new category, you're going to have to invest your money accordingly. Right?
Absolutely.
And you're going to have to accept the fact, and often you sometimes have to do a sort of, hey, we are a category, but just start here, and then we'll show you the whole category, right? So there's the product-led growth approach to that. Look, it's amazing when you create a category, you have a moment in time where you have a tremendous lead. I mean, Demand-Based created essentially the ABM category, and along came a number of competitors who sort of changed how it's even talked about now. And is it intent, right? 6 cents with that. So there was a competitive advantage, and there still is, because Demand-Based was the university. And by the way, that's another reason to think about it. When you create a category, you can create the educational program. Like Demand-Based really led on that. It's a lot of energy to get there, to do it well. And a lot of folks die trying.
Yeah, I think the product has a huge
Of course.
part of it too, right? Like, again, I'm not sure Drift did the greatest thing inventing conversational marketing, glorifying a chatbot, but like HubSpot created a category. Clay right now is creating a category. Like, those are all products that I think are driving that more so than marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't agree with you completely. Like HubSpot created inbound as a category and delivered on it through marketing. They spent a tremendous amount on content in the early days. Right? They built all these tools. They educated the market. Their conference became the place that you went. It's called Inbound. I mean, I think they did a fantastic job, and I think it's really paid off for them. Now, the irony is they've expanded and grown beyond inbound.
Yeah.
And so they've sort of had to evolve, but I think that their marketing was better in their when they were working on that category.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Before we come to a close, I want to give you a lightning round.
Okay.
All right. I like how we got this one set up too, James. So, one book every CMO should read. Go.
Oh God, of course, Renegade Marketing by Drew Neisser.
There we go. All right, we're cutting it off. Forget it.
A corollary. I just read Udi Legidor's book, Courageous Marketing. It's a great read.
One marketing trend you're tired of hearing about. So many to choose from.
So many personas. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
I kind of know the answer to this. One skill CMOs will absolutely need in the next 2 years.
Same skill they need today: leadership.
One mistake CMOs should stop making immediately.
Just giving the tools, the AI tools to their team without training them and benchmarking.
All right, last one. What has been your favorite CMO huddle moment so far?
So about 3 weeks ago, a CMO in our community sent support at CMOHuddles.com. They said, help. Our CRO just said, I want marketing to contribute 60% of pipe instead of 30% of pipe. And I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning. So we did help. We reached out to 6 folks that we knew would have some kind of an answer. They all provided benchmark data that they had to this CMO. That CMO was then able to sort of bring that information on a very rational level, say, well, there's a lot to talk about here, and settled on a number that actually made sense and sort of averted a crisis. And, that's what a beautiful thing when a community is working and everybody knows they're going to have one of those help moments. I love it when our community comes to the rescue.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, Drew, before we let you go, how can people learn more about CMO Huddles and reach out to you?
Drew Neisser on LinkedIn and CMOHuddles.com. And hopefully they're watching this in 2 or 3 days. They'll see our new bot on our website, and which will be able to answer all their questions. But yeah, CMOHuddles.com, lots of good information. We do have a free starter program for all B2B heads of marketing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Drew. We really appreciate it. Great conversation. So until next time, guys, we'll catch you later.
Thanks, guys.